Welcome to the Delight Your Marriage podcast. You're joining me, Bella Rose, as I dive deep into the beauty, power, and truths about intimacy. Learn not only the practicals, but the heart behind what making love is all about. Delight your marriage. Hi there, and welcome. This is Bella, and I have got such a great conversation that we're about to dive into with Gary Thomas. Now, if you're not familiar with Gary, I have been familiar with him for quite a while, and he has got some really great books. One is Married Sex that has just come out, and we're going to be talking a lot about that book, and he's just got some fantastic tools and tips and perspectives that I think will really bless you, whether you're a husband or a wife. Now, one of his major books and most popular ones is called Sacred Marriage. And I'm very familiar with that one. And you may be used to or have heard of the phrase because others in my podcast interviews have referenced it. But what if God has made us in marriage to be holy more than just happy? And I think it's a great insight. And it speaks to so much more about what the marriage relationship can be and what we can learn through it and from it. And then the other book that I have gained a lot of insight from is Sacred Pathways. And in fact, my own home church did an entire sermon series based on his book. And so it's such a joy to have Gary here, and he's got a heart after the Lord. And how does that translate into intimacy, physical intimacy? I can't wait for you to hear his perspectives because I think it's going to challenge all of us to go out of our comfort zone, another step in intimacy in the context of a oneness, a holy connection with God at the center of your marriage, and intimacy being an outpouring of the relationship he designed and he made. So let's go ahead and dive in. Here's how we started. We literally just got on I'm giving you guys the full scoop. We just got on the call. I was a minute late. I closed all my tabs and I was like, Gary, I just want to say before we start, I wanted to just ask you, is this something, because sometimes people will reach out and they'll say, oh, we like your podcast, but maybe they just were searching and they kind of want to be a guest on a certain podcast or what have you. And so usually I don't really respond to that, or my wonderful Darcy office manager doesn't respond to that. But when I got an email from Gary Thomas saying that he has listened to the podcast, I thought, well, my gosh. So I had to ask Gary if he had actually listened to the podcast. Okay, so go ahead, Gary.
I did. I said I've listened to many of them, and I mentioned that I thought you're one. I don't know when this will be airing, but Back a Ways, The Impotence of Masculinity, I thought was just brilliant. And what's drawn me back, Bella, is you have not just a pastoral voice, you have a pastoral tone and content. That's why I think you reach both men and women. And it's refreshing. It's weird to me that I have to say this. I wouldn't have had to 10 years ago. But on that podcast, when you admit that men and women are different, though neurologically, neuroscientists, I had two practicing neuroscientists vet my book, Married Sex, on the neuroscience. And then it still gets the label junk science by some because they just have a motivation to say that there's no difference between men and women. It can be overstated. And I say many times, I think you can do great damage to your marriage if you treat your husband like most men want to be treated, if that's not how he does, or your wife like most women like to be treated, not how she does.
Totally.
But you recognize that there is a beautiful way that God designed us to complement each other, bring out the best of each other, affirm each other, learn from each other, honor each other, and respect each other. And it's just rare in this day and age to see someone who has such reverence for men and women. And I think it's because you work with men. And I think some people have said that about us as well. They said, Gary, we can tell you work with real couples. That Deborah, my co-author at Phileta, actually works with couples. There's a difference when you're trying to help couples, and when you're trying to write a book or a blog that just causes outrage, because you want to be healing. You recognize that life is messy. We're not perfect. We're filled with sin, and you get that. So I just like, for you, what I think of when I think of Bella is I think of the pastoral tone to men and women, the understanding of how God created us, but with appropriate humility, that we're all different. They're continuums. The way you handle scripture, the way you call us to the better things of the faith, sacrifice and service, that can be abused. It can be taken too far, but you apply it in a very pastoral way. I think those are the things that keep me coming back. It just kind of reminds me of my own approach, and I just love hearing you say it.
Look, Gary, that is just such water to my soul. That is so special. And I just, when you reached out, this is embarrassing to say, I didn't realize you were the author of Sacred Pathways. That has such blessed me and blessed our congregation, my pastor and my husband. It was such a blessing to me to know that my husband and I could experience God differently. And that was okay. It didn't mean that, I was more spiritual because I was, and it was just like, God is teaching and loving and speaking through him and to him in a completely different way. And anyway, I just have to be so grateful because it to your point, I mean, we're in messy work, just trying to help point people towards Jesus. That's the goal.
Well, because I'm familiar with your message and what you emphasize, I felt like, she might not know anything about me, but I feel like she's a sister in arms. And I'm always happy to talk to a coworker in the gospel, and particularly in marriage ministry, pointing people not just to each other, but to Christ, recognizing our highest call is spiritual maturity, which leads to marital intimacy, and keeping that together. I feel like you do a good job of that.
Oh, thank you.
Gary, so just so grateful that our audience is getting a chance to hear from you. But just in case they haven't heard of you before now, first of all, I'm really glad they are hearing of you. But would you mind just giving an introduction to yourself and your work and a little bit of background?
I've been a writer for most of my adult life. I've written over 20 books.
Wow.
Sacred Marriage, you mentioned Sacred Pathways. Sacred Marriage is the bestseller.
Amazing.
It's what made the writing life possible for me. Sacred Pathways is probably the best-selling non-marriage book. 9 different ways that we connect with God. And I started out writing, how do we help people connect with God? How are people formed in Christ? But then my 4th book was this book called Sacred Marriage that I looked at as a spiritual formation book. Some may be familiar with the subtitle. It's been lampooned and I think misrepresented, but it's what if God designed marriage to make us holy more than to make us happy, not instead of happy. I quote John Wesley, who said he doesn't know anybody who's truly happy who isn't pursuing holy. I'm not pitting them against each other. It's that sense of when we heard, especially 20 years ago when the book first came out, well, doesn't God want me to be happy? Of course I have to divorce my spouse. And again, not talking about abusive situations, just those kind of marriages where they just grew apart or they were frustrated with each other, and really trying to say, well, you know what? No marriage is easy in its own right. I think marriage is a difficult relationship, but I think it's a glorious relationship. And I think God uses the difficulties to grow us into better people who resemble Christ, if we accept it that way. And so I really looked at it as a book that, I grew up with the tradition where the closer you become to a monk or a nun, the holier you are. But I got married at 22. I had 3 kids by the age of 30. And I'm like, I'm not going to be a monk. I mean, if I tell my wife I need to go get holy, I'm going to go off to a monastery for the weekend while you watch the 3 kids. That, wouldn't have ended well.
Right.
So But I noticed how God was challenging me through marriage to learn how to see my sin in a way I never had before, to learn how to listen, to learn how to value somebody above myself, to learn how to forgive and ask for forgiveness, how to serve, and all of those things that monks and nuns, look, a lot of avenues for them to grow. Isolation, solitude can be very spiritually profitable, but marriage can be spiritually profitable. And I hadn't seen somebody approach it that way. And so that's when that book took off and writing full time became a possibility for me.
That is so beautiful. I love that you said marriage can be spiritually profitable, because you're absolutely right. Especially a lot of very spiritual people can say, that if I just didn't have that person, I would be the, holiest of holy. I would be all set.
Well, is one time when, because I'd read a lot of the Christian classics. I love people. What are the Christian classics? Most books have a shelf life somewhere between yogurt and milk. That's about a lot of the books that get the big things, they'll sell 80% of their copies in their first 4 months. Mine never go that way, but that's the traditional life of a book. Christian classics are just books that have been read for hundreds or even a couple thousand years. And so reading about monks and nuns, because most of Christian classics were written by monks and nuns, for monks and nuns, you start to think, well, man, that is really the holy route. But I had this wonderful weekend with my wife. I came back from the trip and Lisa greeted me with a wonderful time of marital intimacy. I'm just got to tell you, when you're a husband who travels and the wife says, you know what, I bet you've been missing me. And I said, yeah, you bingo, you win that bet. And so we had a wonderful time.
You win that bet.
Yeah. But then Bella, this is real life. I had 2 small kids at the time, and the toddler had a fever. The baby was sick. And so the baby kept wanting to nurse. And, at times babies stop nursing to eat. They're nursing for comfort. And I was trying to hold our toddler, but when a toddler's really sick, sometimes mama's arms are their preferred arms. And I literally watched my wife give all of her body to her family. Oh. And I thought, for her, going to a solitary prayer retreat would sound like an absolute vacation. Far from making a spiritual, compromise, this was the route for us to spiritual maturity. And same thing for me. I wanted to be a writer early on. Wow. My wife wanted to stay home with the kids, and that really delayed when I could do because I had to do a job to feed my family and try to become a writer on the side. So both of us had challenges and sacrifices we had to make. They weren't pleasant, but I think we're different people because of them. And I think marriage helped shape us that way.
Oh, I just love that. And it gives so much value and maybe even dignity to the little tiny annoyances of, a toddler that's sneezing in your face and whiny and tired and waking you up.
Well, Lisa was ridiculously young when we got married. If I'm honest, I would tell you she was 19. I just can't believe I married a teenager. But since I believe life begins at conception, in God's eyes, she was in her 20s.
Right? It. That's right. Of course.
So, and then our first kid came about 3.5 years into our marriage. And so, she was a pretty young woman, and we had 3 kids. And I just remember her frustration. One time she's always talked about having white spots, because we had one kid that had some real stomach issues, spitting up everywhere she goes. And you can change your kids' clothes 10 times a day. You usually don't change yours. And she kept talking about it. And so one of her birthdays, I think, or Mother's Day or something, I wrote her this story called White Spots. And it was basically about how when Jesus said, "Blessed are you, I was hungry and you fed me. I was naked and you clothed me." And the whole point was, who comes in this world more a stranger than a babe? Literally 100% dependent on somebody caring for her or him. Who comes into the world more naked? who gets hungrier, who gets sicker more. And I just wanted my wife to see everything you're doing is what Jesus says commends them. And we said, but they're my kids. I said, but they're God's kids first.
Yes.
And those white spots are badges of honor and spiritual glory that I think you'll hear about in eternity. She was a devoted mom. And I just wanted in that story for her to see that this isn't just a physical thing you're doing. It's a real spiritual journey you're on, raising these kids. And so it's how we've looked at our marriage. We're 37 years in. I can't believe it. I know you said on one podcast that you work with a lot of men who have been married longer than you've been alive. So I might be one of those men, but it's been a journey. I'll tell you that.
Oh, Gary, amazing. I need to mention the beautiful story you just shared with us is a window into the perspective you have of your wife. So any husband listening, I'd like you to scroll on back and re-listen to exactly what you just heard from Gary, because if you're wondering why Gary and his wife have a great intimate life, it's because that's the way he sees his wife. That's the way he sees his wife. Please pursue that kind of perspective of your wife, and the rest is going to really take care of itself. Gary, tell us about, what's a question that I should ask you that you're like, if Bella would just ask me this, I would riff forever.
Well, I mean, you've led me to my favorite subjects, loving God and loving my wife. So
yes.
I think you hit them all. I mean, I think as Christians, we're called to live a life of love. But I've found love for God first. This is why I love it when people love Sacred Pathways, because I've found it's so essential to connect with God. If I don't, I start demanding from my wife. When I'm connecting with God and being affirmed and accepted and loved and empowered and inspired, I want to give to my wife. And so often marital issues are spiritual hunger issues in my life. And so I really like to keep that. Let's talk about how do we love God? How do we grow closer to God? And that's what the pathways are about. But then, life is about loving people. And the older I get, the more I realize that. And Bella, I love the way you say your spouse is your first person. Because the reality is this world will try to rip you up. Your kids may not appreciate you. Your coworkers may slam you. People that have never met you may try to define you and will slander you. But to have that one relationship, I didn't grow up a particularly secure person. I'm third of 4 kids, 2 older brothers, perfect older brother. But I mean, as perfect as a guy. He literally is an Eagle Scout, solid Christian, just a great guy. Then had a sister who is like a saint. She works in Child Protective Services, has 4 boys, and so I just wasn't that secure. And yet having a woman who literally knows me better than anyone ever has, and she still likes me, and she still respects me, I can't tell you how healing that's been for me. Just that, okay. I see it in her eyes, I see the way she looks at me. And so that's where I think love is so powerful toward God and toward each other.
Powerful. Yes. Yes. And okay, so now we'll talk to the women. Do that for your husband. Love him, accept him, respect him. I just love it. So good, Gary. Well, tell me, what was the genesis of Married Sex? This book that has just come out. What's the genesis of it? You've got a co-author. Maybe give us a little insight around that. Yeah.
Well, I had, I'm on a number of emails and text messages from people that do what I do, marriage speakers and writers and all of that. And it was a couple of years ago, they just said, man, we think we need a new book for evangelical couples on sex. They said that the ones that were classics are getting a little bit dated. Some of the ones that were more popular had language where it's, well, don't be offended, wives. There's still some good content in here.
Right.
and they said, we just want a book we don't have to apologize for. And a couple of them said, yeah, we think you're the guy to write that.
Wow.
But I just didn't think the climate was right, Bella, for another book on sex written by a man in his 50s. And so I wanted to co-write it. And I had really admired the work of Deborah Fileta. And what I liked about, I loved her writings on marriage, but I liked the fact that we're different decades. She's in her 30s. I was in my 50s when we started. Obviously, she's a woman. I'm a man. I wanted a wife's perspective. She's been married 15 years. I've been married well over 35. She's a licensed counselor. I'm a spiritual writer. So we had different skill sets. We really wanted to write a book that could help couples understand, okay, these are the biggest roadblocks to sexual intimacy. And here's what a marker is of healthy sexuality, and how do we get couples to go there? And I was just thrilled. When you start out a collaborative book, you really don't know how's it going to go. And I couldn't have been more pleased. I thought Deborah did a brilliant job with her chapters. I love the way she refined mine. Well, Gary, this is how a wife's going to read it. Maybe we want to put this a different way. And then I could advocate for men. And it's how I praised your show, Bella, is what I wanted the book to do. I wanted men to feel heard and understood, not to be shamed, not to be humiliated, not to feel like you shouldn't act like a man,
right?
But also women to feel heard and understood.
Yeah.
Finally, my husband will understand. He'll get me. Now, we know that not every man or woman is alike, so we call it a book of questions as much as answers. And our approach is, this is what it's often like. Talk about it. Use this as a conversation. Ask each other. We want women to understand and appreciate men. Both of those are important, not just understanding, but appreciating. We want men to understand and appreciate women, because we found that a lot of husbands make love to their wives like they want their wives to make love to them. And a lot of wives make love to their husbands like they want their husbands to make love like they. And we're like, you know what? You have different bodies. You have different brains.
Yep.
A woman's skin is up to 10 times more sensitive than a man's. So just think about how that impacts foreplay. It's why women tend to be into it more. It's why often men feel like the wife's touch is too light, and the wife might say, "No, be a little bit lighter. Maybe you're too heavy." Well, when you just kind of understand those things, it's like, oh, and just telling men, "Hey, you know what? A woman's nose is much more acutely sensitive than yours. Just because you smell okay to yourself doesn't mean you smell okay to your wife." Just a few tips, and even to get more explicit.
Please.
I've been married over 30 years, and we were talking. We polled or interviewed over 1,000 couples, and one of the things that kept coming out when we were asking couples about the whole experience, for many wives, their favorite part of lovemaking is when the husband first enters the wife. As a guy, I never thought about it. I mean, you're thinking that's the start, and they're saying, I want to relish it. Here's what it means to me. Here's how it feels. And so we just describe it to guys saying, hey, if that might be her favorite time, maybe you pause and think, how do I make this extra special? What's painful? What's more pleasurable? How do I clue in that, okay, I wouldn't even think of this. If it's a big thing for, how do I be more sensitive to it? So there's just a lot of things like that, Bella, that I'm still learning, that Deborah was learning, that we just want to pass on to couples.
That is fantastic. Even just those 2 tips are fantastic. Care to share any more? Were there any other like ahas that you just felt like were wildly helpful?
Yeah, well, one of the, there are a couple things. One that was a favorite chapter for a lot of people has been the 5 senses of sex. It's fascinating to me how the Song of Songs not only celebrates marital sexuality, but every sense is emphasized as erotic potential. And so we just look at the 5 senses. We quote the scriptures and talk about how bringing in the senses more. I think especially for long-term monogamy, trying to emphasize certain senses can have a huge impact. And so we just talk about smell. Well, what's the big about smell? Well, one wife said she has this perfume that she wore on her wedding night. Every anniversary, she dabs that between her breasts. And the sense in our brain, smell and memory are connected. And it brings back that special time when they were first sexually intimate. Another wife talked about certain smells that they love. But one woman said her favorite smell is unscented. So she was, I want clean, but I want it to be unscented. And so that's, again, why you want to say, well, don't just take what another wife says. Ask your wife about it. And so we talked about difference in touches. Music can be a huge, what music does to our brain. Being thoughtful about what you listen to while you're making love literally fires up your brain. Your listeners might be younger, but if they remember old style computers where you could see on the front, the more programs you use, the more it would light up because more of the memory board was being used. Our brains are kind of like that. If you're engaging all of your senses, you're literally more alive. More of your brain is focused. And this is beautiful. The one act that makes you see, smell, hear, taste, and touch is kissing with your eyes open. You're tasting, you're smelling, you're feeling. If your eyes are open, you're looking. And if you're doing it right, you can hear it. And so it's really one of the most intimate things you can do is kiss, learn to kiss passionately with all of those senses going. And so just looking at that through the senses, again, as couples can say, oh, wow, this is something entirely new. How it can be different? And I tell women, your voice is an instrument. If you think of a woman's voice, entirely different atmospheres can be set. If she is laughing, if she's moaning, if she's cooing, if she's begging or pleading or just silent because she's so intense, every one of those things I've described is an entirely different kind of sexual experience. It's what I love about married sex. We can have all different kinds, but just what that sound does in creating an entirely different experience. And so I described 5 or 6 different kinds of sex just with modulation of a woman's voice. She's setting the tone and doing that. And so when you go back to listening as a sense, another thing that we talked about was simmering sexuality, which again, I love. In sexual therapy today, there's been a lot of talk about simmering, which is, it's not foreplay, it's for foreplay. The idea is that it's difficult to go from ice cold to red hot. And so if you can live it lukewarm on a day when you think there's going to be sexual activity, you're going to be more open to the idea. And what one wife did to do that, and I should say, you look in the Song of Songs and there's literally an account of a husband meditating on how beautiful his wife is, how he's attracted to every part of her. And then there's a long passage about the wife doing it to the husband. But one wife in Simmering, knowing she's going to have sex, she has this playlist of songs that they have literally made love to, that she's experienced orgasms listening to. And so when her husband's coming home, she's making macaroni and cheese for her kids, listening to this music. She's not just heating up their dinner, she's heating up her body to receive her husband. And what I love, this is where it's so practical, Bella, because Lisa and I are at a point in our age and whatnot where we've always been really matched libido wise. I don't know that there's ever been a higher or lower. I think when I was younger, situationally, maybe I would have been considered the higher drive, but we're really at a place. And so sometimes Lisa will say, if it's been too long, hey, we're having sex tonight at 9:30 and it's not an option. So keep yourself in gear. But why I love that, because she's calling me to simmer. She's saying, okay, I know you go to sleep early. Don't lay down and watch TV at 8:30 because you're not going to feel like being intimate with me at night. I don't take that as a threat or an obligation. It's a wonderful invitation. It's like, okay, game's on, game day. Get your mind in gear, get yourself in gear. And those are just things that I learned writing this book, and I was eager to share with people to read it.
I just love it. There's so much good in there. I love the idea of simmering, especially for somebody who, getting in gear is important. And I think definitely for me as more the lower libido of the two, it's really helpful for me to, even in my head, like, okay, wait, tonight is the night. I'm going to be thinking about it. I'm going to make sure I do some dancing earlier. When it's just me in the bathroom, I'm going to get into my body and just feel. And I just love this. I love the encouragement about music. That is such a difference maker. And especially the idea of music ahead of time, ahead of the experience, because a lot of times we've got to start in faith and then our body kind of catches up to us and gets us excited.
Well, one wife who had to learn how to simmer, you got it. She started in the shower. She was told, okay, choose a particular kind of soap and take your time. This isn't naughty. This isn't sinful. Just enjoy the sensual experience. And that sensual doesn't mean sinful. It just means enjoy the sensual experience of giving yourself a shower, getting clean. Choose undergarments that get you in the mood, that you like, that get you thinking. As you put on oils or whatever you do throughout the day, you're listening to songs, you're getting your mind. And so for her, it was just this all day thing, because her husband was higher drive, where she could, so that by the evening, she's like, she can't wait. But she just realized with her brain, your brain is what it is. I got to get it in gear. And Bella, we see athletes do this all the time. You watch those tennis players walk onto the court with Wimbledon, often with earbuds in, or professional football players or basketball players walking in, and they're getting themselves up for the game. All right.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, marital intimacy in marriage is more important than these games. And so if we have to get ourselves there, that's just life. It's real life. Then I think it's good to do it.
That's right. It is real life. And, Gary, you said, how many kids did you say you have?
We have three.
Three. Okay. And would you say, and through your research and through writing this book with the many thousand people that you interviewed, have you seen trickle down effects of the sexual relationship impacting who we are as parents and the environment that children get to grow up in?
I think it's been one of the most rewarding things, Bella, just seeing that. And it's not just because they're enjoying sex more. Some of them are realizing, I got a call from Matt. This was before the book came out, but it was I was speaking on it. And he said, thanks for giving me the most awkward conversation of my life. And I said, what are you talking about? And he says, well, he had a couple came in their early 70s. I'd just spoken there. And I'd done a session on God's view of sexuality and the Song of Songs and God celebrating it. And the wife said, nobody had ever told me this. I thought it was just for the husband. I didn't know God was okay with it like that. And the man looks at the pastor and says, Pastor, you got to help me. I don't know if I can keep up. But so the pastor's just sitting there. What am I supposed to say to these? They're old enough to be my parents. But the wife, Bella, was angry as well, saying, how many decades did we lose because we didn't understand the Bible? And nobody told us what the Bible said. And so I'm thrilled. I'm hoping couples don't have to wait to their 70s. But some, I think they just get busy. In your 20s and 30s, I think Deborah does a great job where sometimes you feel like, before you have kids, it's often spontaneous. It's easy. You often desire it. And then you just get tired. And Deborah's husband's a good example. Deborah's husband's an eye surgeon. And when he was going through residency, he could be working 100-hour weeks. And it's telling, he said every picture of him that year, he's laying on the couch with their baby on him. So if you're working 100-hour weeks, he said, I desired sex, but I never had the energy for it. It's not a lack of interest in Deborah. It was just one of those life situations. And the same thing can happen if you've got a couple toddlers and certainly a baby, and you just need the reminder. Oh, okay. We don't want to let this die.
That's
And so we're hoping that book will just kind of be that. There are really 4 areas where I think people get held up sexually. For some Christians, it's theological. They have a repressive view of sexuality, either a view that it's only for the husband or that God allows it for procreation, but you shouldn't enjoy it too much, or that it's really limited on what you can enjoy. They're more concerned about what you shouldn't do in bed than what God celebrates you doing in bed. The other thing can be psychological, where sexual abuse, you've dealt with these, past marriage where it was a nightmare, where it wasn't mutually pleasurable, where it was abusive and coercive and manipulative. You're going to have to deal with that. It could be relational. If a guy's got a problem with anger, that's going to impact his sex life. It impacts his ability to perform sexually. It impacts his wife's desire to be intimate with him. That's not a sexual issue. That's a personal relational issue. He's got to deal with that. Then the third thing, it can be physical. Sex is a physical sport that you have to master. A guy learning control. Later in life, if erectile dysfunction becomes an issue, well, maybe he never had to work before to be, what does he have to do? A woman's body changes dramatically through the month, and then as she gets older into menopause and whatnot. So it's understanding some of the physical challenges. And then finally, I think it's just creative challenges. Couples get bored. You've made love. It's really fun. I'm working with a premarital couple. I'm going to be marrying them next month as I speak this. So they might be married when this comes out. But I encourage them. This might just seem like a crazy idea. I encourage them to put a dime in a jar every time they make love. Because I said, imagine when this is the 100th time we've been intimate. And this is the 1,000th time. And I said to him, and I said to the husband, hey, you should let her buy whatever she wants with these dimes, by the way. But count them up. I go, because then it's a dual motivation, right? I want those earrings or something. But you just, after a while, you need creative things. And that was the purpose of the 1,000 couples that we pulled or interviewed, because you don't really want to sit in your small group and say, you guys wouldn't believe what we did last night. I mean, it's like, we don't need to picture that. But in a book, when you can change the names and be very explicit, I do want to warn listeners, Bella, because of these stories, it is an explicit book. I hope tasteful. It's not pornographic, but they're giving their ideas of things that work. Just experience of wives saying, this is what it feels like when my husband enters. But that's, I think, the holiest way to have new ideas. Never thought about that. Well, that's an idea. So we're really trying to address those 4 issues: the psychological, the theological, the physical, and the creative, so that couples can thrive in a way maybe they never have before.
Oh, I just love it. And the thing is, if you're not explicit, if you're not specific, it's like, well, what? Then we're just theoretical, and then no one gets helped.
Well, and it's cause, and some might think it's too. But I had one example where the chapters choose your position or choose your adventure. And the whole point is that most couples fall into 1 or 2 positions, which is fine. You like it, doing it. I don't criticize anybody, but just a story of a guy who was just sitting on the bed reading a book or watching a lot. I don't remember what he was doing. And his wife came in after she showered and just got this idea. She drops her towel and says, well, you can keep reading, but I'm going to sit here for a while. So she sat with her back against his chest, and they started making love, and they started and ended in that position. And it was just different. And he said it was accidental. We didn't think about it, but it was just like, wow, it felt fresh. And so we just described. Now we don't say like, well, and then we just kind of set it up so you knew what was happening without. But that's the kind of thing. The whole point was, you know what? They accidentally fell into a position that really made things fresh. How about you choose it? And hear what some other couples did. And so we help husbands see, here's what wives say, well, this is why I like to be on top, what it means to me. One wife said, I used to think sex was naughty, and I just feel empowered up there. She goes, I just feel like I'm taking back what was stolen from me. But then she said, but when I need to really feel that physical release, I want him, she said, I want him to fold me up like a pretzel. I want his arms all around me. I want him to feel strong. And it was just helpful for couples to recognize every act of sex can speak of fun, athleticism, sensuousness, spiritual connection, intense emotional connection, or just immense physical pleasure. And every one of those is holy and good and sacred. And you could say, what kind of sex do you want to have tonight? Here's the menu. Maybe we can choose something different.
Gary, that is just awesome. I love that this conversation started with the way we connect with God, the way we love God. That is our priority. And then loving your spouse is just an outpouring of that love, that we get to love our spouse in this way. And so having the practical tools, having the ideas, here's what we do, here's what we can do to get each other enjoying. And I love tell me those different, the last thing I remember was intense pleasure, but what were the other ones that you said?
Oh, well, the kinds of sex. Yeah. Well, you can have athletic sex. You can have fun sex. You can have spiritual feeling sex. You can have sensual sex. You can have, I probably forgot some. It was spontaneous. I wasn't reading
it was spontaneous. I didn't know if these were chapter headings, if I needed to scribble this down.
They're just wives. Sometimes wives said, you know what? I just want to feel like I have this big, strong husband with his arms around me. I like it because I feel his strength. And now I realize some wives, if they weren't in a healthy marriage, Bella, that would be terrifying. And so again, you have to understand, we're talking about marriages where there's healthy connection and respecting that. But within those marriages, knowing that sometimes, here's a couple where the husband can last a long time, and they used to take advantage of it. But then they had, I think, 4 kids. I may have that wrong. Might be 5, might be 3. And so it became this, honey, the kids are in front of the TV. We got 10 minutes. Turn the TV up loud, get up here. And they would do these quickies because the wife said, I just needed a physical release. I've got kids pawing on me all day. If I don't have anybody touching me that much, but I get the release, I'm good with it. But then she and her husband noticed something. Quickies are to marital health like fast food is to the physical body. It meets the immediate need. It doesn't really nurture the soul. It doesn't nurture the marriage. It doesn't nurture the body. And so they had to learn, sometimes we need to go to the hotel. Sometimes we need to recapture those gourmet moments. There's nothing wrong with quickie sex. If there's a position that it works for her, she's going to orgasm. It's good for him to know that, because sometimes that's just what she wants. 10 minutes, make it happen. But for the health of the relationship, enjoy the journey. Make the orgasm the end of a long, delightful experience. It's part of it, but just a part of it, not the main event. And so that's where the different positions come into play on what do you want out of this experience? What do you each desire? What do you each need? And of course, you can do more than one on any given session.
I just love that. I love, I think the piece that just, dropped the mic for me of something that you just said was, a quickie. Yeah. Suffice it. It's a sufficient. It satisfies the need in the moment, maybe, but does it nourish? Does it cause that connection? Does it grow the intimacy? And I love that, especially as a wife, to hear and remember and recognize, especially I would say, a lot of my listeners are the low libido wives and the higher drive husbands. That's who I attract because that's, what I live. And, especially for a wife who's like, okay, I want to love my husband well, but also I want to be fully nourished and, rejuvenated through a God-given gift of this opportunity in front of me. Is that what you were getting at there?
Absolutely. It's recognizing that, particularly with women, God designed your body for sexual pleasure. Your listeners all know this, that while the male sexual organ has a couple of different functions, the female sexual organ, the clitoris, has one, and that's for sexual pleasure. And so wives, when you want to experience sex to its fullest, that is, have an orgasm, that's not sinful and it's not selfish. All you want to be is who God created you to be. And that's as holy and sacred as being a woman who wants to teach the Bible, who wants to raise kids, who wants to build a business, who wants to get water to villages that don't have it in Africa. It's what God created you to do, to really enjoy this with your marriage. There's a reason God created you. So you want to be able to go back and enjoy that. But you also recognize they're just different kinds. For her, there was this immediate thing. And here, since I know I'm talking to so many wives, Bella, what I so appreciate about Lisa, in this area of our life, there just have never been any power struggles. For whatever reason, she just got it. And so sometimes I think when I would travel a lot and the kids were young, and when I'd be traveling where I'd have to get up like at 3 or 4 a.m. and I'd just be packing, she would almost insist, we are going to sleep together. And I'd think, man, I'd just kind of rather get some more sleep. She said, no, you're not going on this trip hungry. It was just her thinking. She says, I just want us to connect. And then sometimes, particularly when I'm young, I want wives to get this. It does usually change. I don't want husbands to be mad because some husbands say it hasn't changed for me, but it's a whole different thing for me. I just turned 60 than it was for me in my 20s. And my wife's sensitivity, Bella, when sometimes she would go and I'm getting flirty and suggestive and she'd just go, you just really need me right now, don't you? I'd say, yeah, I really do. And, she'd take and the gratitude I feel, Bella, because I wanted to be a man of integrity. Yes. Now, Lisa and I have had a thing where for her, it's always been easy. If I'm pleased, she's pleased. All right. It's always been a dual thing. It's always been, I don't want to give too much information, but so she knew there's the payoff for her as well. But I just appreciated her saying, you know what? I think we just need to go have sex right now.
Yes.
And so when she says to me now at this stage in our life, okay, we're having sex tonight at 9:30. You keep saying tomorrow, be ready. I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to be there. I want to be there for you. And so as we look back on our marriage over 37 years of this, just the gratitude, so that if the day came, and the day will come, Bella, when we're not able to, maybe it's her body, maybe it's mine. I will cherish her no less and love her no less, because I know as long as we were able to, we have devoted ourselves to each other. We've devoted our minds to each other. We've devoted our bodies to each other. And I just want wives to know the gratitude a husband can feel for his wife, that she's walked through it. If he wants to walk in integrity and to know that he's had a wife that shares that and that she enjoys it and that he's doing it for her. Because a lot of times today, I just heard the story of a wife the other day where she was the one that really struggled with pornography, and she really appreciated her husband's openness with her. Yeah. I'm not connecting that you have to have sex or your spouse will cheat. An addiction is something entirely different, that there's nothing you can do or not do that puts it. And I don't want to make it an obligation. Then it gets creepy instead of an invitation. We've never had that dynamic in our marriage. But just, I don't want to lessen the gratitude that a wife feels when a husband says, you know what, I really desire this. You're the only one that God says it's good with. It's just, well, then let's go do that.
That's right. That's right. And, I really feel honored that you said, because I'm talking to a wise woman, I'll talk, and then you shared that. Here's why that matters to me, is because I recognize that in my own work as well. There is and I say this only with hesitation, and my husband will listen to this and he might tell me to take it out. So we'll see. But we as women have to be very careful to not be immature, to see this with immaturity. I think it's so important that we see our husbands as God designed them in certain ways. And I think your wife, making sure this was a priority, regardless if she wanted more sleep, even if you felt you needed to connect in order to be united, even when there's thousands of miles apart. There is an utter, that is maturity. I mean, that is wisdom. And I just want so badly, for wives to catch that. And so many women are, and they're catching it. And it's just incredible. We were just on a call with some women with these incredible breakthroughs, just incredible eyes being opened. And, and I just hope a wife listening hears Gary's heart. He loves his wife, and she has, and, one thing we have some mentor friends of ours. They're just incredible couple, but they always say, Bella, you wouldn't be able to do your work if it wasn't because of your husband. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And I just wonder, Gary, if you would feel the same way with your wife.
Yeah, absolutely. And then let me add to the husbands who are listening to this, and the wives hear that. Husbands, it's a lot easier for a wife to be that way if she knows her pleasure comes first. God just gave me a brain where I literally get more pleasure seeing Lisa pleasured than out of my own. Look, my own is wonderful. I thank God for it. But I don't think anything gets a healthy guy as excited as an excited wife who's enjoying herself and then who's satisfied at the end. Because ultimately, that's what I was going for with this book, Bella, and I think Deborah as well. Not just the sexual pleasure, but, well, let me give us a silly story that explains what we're going for. We were on a cruise. Our kids were young. We shared a cabin with our two daughters. Have you ever been on one of those cruise ships?
I haven't, no.
Okay. Well, the interior cabin, which is a mistake. If you do it, wait a year, save up more money, get a balcony. It's just not worth it. So, but we're with my parents and my extended family. And so the kids are in the cabin with you and they're sleeping 20 inches from you. They bring these cabins and they were just a little too old for us to pretend that they wouldn't hear or know. It just would not have been kind. And then the cruise line gives them key cards. We can't lock them out of the room, right? And so you're on this romantic vacation. You're sailing from Miami as the sun is setting. They're playing reggae music. Everybody's in beach clothes. You're in the water. I mean, it really is designed for romance. And then you're sleeping in a cabin with your kids. My son was with his cousins. And so the whole time, we just wanted to act like a married couple one time. We finally constructed a plan on the last full day of the cruise. My wife is a very healthy eater. She may be the healthiest eater in the world. And so there are certain restaurants we don't usually go to, but there was one restaurant on the boat that had a line. It was called Johnny Rockets. Is that right? It's a chain. And they had hot dogs and hamburgers and milkshakes. And the reason it worked for us is because it was the only restaurant that had a line. People are waiting to get in. And so we got in line and I told the kids, your mother and father have an errand to run, which was true. And remember, they had the key card. So I just want to make it clear, you will not leave this line until we get back because we don't want to lose our place. And they got it. I said, right now, if you get to the front of the line, and we're not back, go ahead and sit down. You can order whatever you want. Because if you try to find us, you might go up that staircase. We'll come down this staircase. We'll miss each other. Aren't we all really hungry? It's okay, now we got it. So right now, if you finish your meal, and then all the time we didn't want that. I go, you can get any dessert you want. If you want a banana split, you want a float, I will buy you this boat. If you just promise me you're gonna stay here until we and they did, and we laughed about it. I don't remember what happened in that room with my wife. I wouldn't tell you if I did. Here's what I do remember. That night, sitting across from my wife and the smiles we shared. We did it. Nobody knows. It was fun. We enjoyed each other. And I love those private marital smiles where I don't want to sound sacrilegious, but I say this even as a pastor, a couple sitting in church on Sunday morning, man, if they knew what Saturday night was like, or you're at a family reunion and they're saying, oh man, didn't we have a great, I just love that private thing that God makes possible in marriage, that we can enjoy each other and you out with the kids and you do it. And that's what I'm going after with this book. I want to create those little smiles. Husbands and wives, they share it. It's sacred. It's private. It's intense. It's wonderful. And I think it's sacred and holy. I think it honors God. I think it builds their marriage. I think it changes the atmosphere of the kids' home. And so we just want to use a book that takes out the roadblocks, that keeps people from thriving sexually, and then gives them some creative ideas to really take it to the next level.
Wow, Gary, amazing. Amazing. Okay, well, one final question before we wrap. Will you have it on audiobook?
It's on audio already. I got to tell you, the hardest book I ever had to record. And Deborah said the same thing. It's one thing to write these words. It's another thing to speak it out loud. So if you want to hear it in audio, I read my chapters, Deborah reads hers, but it is available on audio and you could listen together. I do stress the togetherness. I think it's great for husbands and wives to listen to together so you can stop. Is it like that for you? Do you think you would like that? No, I really wouldn't, but maybe I'd like this. And then also let me say, because you have a wide range of lists, this really is for married couples or couples almost married because it's explicit. We've had a lot of married couples say, man, this ramped me up because of the stories that the other couples share. I'm just speaking, I care about your heart and integrity before God if you're listening. So if you're single, I'm not a prude, but I don't want you to invite temptation into your life. I think this will get you thinking and your body revved a little bit. So be careful if you're single and maybe wait till you're married or right before you're married so that it doesn't cause you to stumble.
No, thank you for saying that, because you're right. We do have singles that listen in preparation. I love that. And I love the encouragement of listening as a couple. And because this is a podcast, people love to listen. And so they're listeners. Yes. So they would prefer to listen than read any day. So I am excited for that. And, I haven't read the book yet. So the more I hear about it, this is it's such an exciting tool and just opportunity for revelation, revival, and intimacy. It's just phenomenal. Gary, I would love to ask if you would kind of visualizing a person listening, and I'll kind of let you go from there. But if you would pray for the listeners, however you feel led, mm-hmm. Would you be willing to do that?
Thank you. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Father, I thank you for creating us as male and female. I thank you for creating us with bodies. I thank you for creating sex as it is, the way that we can enjoy each other and honor each other and cherish each other and what it does to our marriages afterwards. And something that's such a powerful tool of intimacy, we know your enemy wants to destroy and wreck and pervert. And I just pray that your spirit would cause us to rise up, that couples listening would say, we will reclaim this land. We want to reclaim this area of our marriage. For some, there might need to be some real deep healing for abuse or damage from a prior marriage or sex before marriage. But your spirit is more than capable of doing that. Lord, it might be a misunderstanding of your word, not understanding how you embrace and celebrate and bless this, and even give us tips in your word to increase the joy of it. Yes. It might be relational issues, Lord, where there's issues of control or manipulation or selfishness. Lord, it might just be physical issues that we just need strength, that you created us with bodies. You will help us learn how to control our bodies and use our bodies to please each other. And Lord, also just to refresh that we could learn in an appropriate way from a community, ideas that others have. Lord, whatever couples listening need, I just pray that you would bring that to them so they could have those smiles. And Lord, not just those smiles with each other, but looking up to you and saying, thank you for creating me to be a man or a woman. Thank you for calling me into marriage. Thank you for letting me experience this. And that would be a glimpse to them of your kindness, your goodness. because this is all about you. This is all what you
Yes.
make possible. So they would be worshipers, they would be grateful to you, they would sing your praise. In Jesus' name, amen.
In Jesus' name, amen. Gary, this has just been awesome.
Oh, thank you, Bella. I was looking forward to this. I was so glad you said you wanted to, because I do look at you as a sister in arm with a similar vision and passion. And I just want to tell the listeners, keep listening. I love what I hear. I think you're getting great biblical content and practical help. And so I will keep listening as well.
Gary, I just so appreciate this. My goodness. And you're clearly know what you're talking about. So I hope the listener will read or listen to Married Sex. I've actually got a team member who's already started reading it, and she's just like, oh my gosh, this is so good. And I have been reading another of his books, and another team member is reading another of his books. So I just encourage you to check out Gary's stuff. He's really got wisdom and a heart after the Lord. And if you're a listener and you want insight or information about our programs, you're welcome to check out delightyourmarriage.com. And you can find out about our accountability-based live programs and to actually help you, see transformation in your own marriage. So you can just go to delightyourmarriage.com for that information. All righty. God bless you. I look forward to speaking to you next week.